You. I hope that you're having a great day. As I interact with some folks, at least in central Maine, many of you were coming back online with power, so we have been praying for you. And so thankful again for those line workers, those men and women who have been out to restore power to all of you. It's often interesting how much we take for granted until we don't have it, and then we're so very thankful for what we do have. So it's been a good reminder, and I'm thankful for those that have been helping each other. It's definitely uh, a good showing, a good example of what the church should be. Well, we're finishing our study on fear, or fear not. We're going to be in Psalm 56 this morning. My goal is to talk about the psalm and then hopefully set you up that you can go read it and understand it once we have gotten into it. So, why don't you go ahead, find Psalm 56? I'm going to set this up. Remember how we do this. Fear or fear not is found 365 times in the Bible. It's found again as fear not or do not be afraid. But fear is spoken of over 500 times, 365 times as fear not. And the rest of it, basically 150, a little less than that, is fear of the Lord, which means a respect or an awe of God. But for our study, we're looking at fear as an unpleasant emotion that is caused by the belief that something or someone dangerous is likely to cause pain or threat. And we have been in much fear over the last 10 or 11 months because there's so much that we don't know. So, where do we turn when we don't know where to turn? Hopefully, we're turning to God. And hopefully, during this time, our relationship with God is growing and it's strengthening. Hopefully, by now, you're in Psalm 56 verse 1 through 3. Let me set this up for you. It's David writing this psalm, and he is running from Saul, and Saul is the king who wants to kill David. If you want to cross reference this, you can go to 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 15. Just a side note, I've been finding myself in this passage, whether it's in Sunday night church when we have evening service, whether it's been through devotion times or just in times of my own personal study, how often I'm turning to this story in David's life and just finding truth and finding comfort in David, a man after God's own heart. And how did he handle fear? And how did he work through this? And how did he allow his fear to draw him closer to the Lord? So I would really encourage you. 1 Samuel 21 and Psalm 56 really tie together really well. So go ahead and read that. I would encourage you to do that throughout the rest of the week. All right. So let's go ahead. We're in Psalm 56, cross referencing 1 Samuel chapter 21. All right. So David, he is fearful because he ran to the Philistines. Now, the Philistines were the sworn enemy of David because David went out and he met their giant, Goliath, in the field, and he was their prize fighter. David took only a boy named David, only a little sling, only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. And he took a stone and he flung it with a slingshot, and he hit the giant right in the head and knocked him out and killed him. And that made the Philistines really upset. And so David is so afraid of King Saul that he's running to the Philistines, the enemy of David, because he needs to escape. And so David is pretending to be a crazy here, and he escapes everyone, Saul, the Philistines, everyone that's hunting him down. You see, David is living in fear of his life. And he's living in fear that he's going to be captured by his enemies, the Philistines, or that King Saul's going to catch him and kill him because Saul has lost the kingdom and David is the anointed king, and Saul's not ready to give up the kingdom. You see, what David is doing is David is asking for mercy from the one person who can help. And that one person that can deliver him is God. I want to point out in these first three verses that David is turning to God in times of trouble. And oftentimes in our life, friend, we turn to ourselves or we look to someone else or we trust in something else when really, when we come to a place that we're not in control, hopefully that drops us to our knees and we start or we continue in prayer to God and prayer with God. You see, what David is doing here is David is seeking God's perspective, a divine perspective from someone who sees the whole picture. Oftentimes, when you and I are in difficult situations, we have a very small perspective. If I were to have a quarter here and hold it up to the camera, you would say that quarter looks very big because it's the perspective of it. But oftentimes, when you hold that quarter back here, when you have a different perspective and you see a bigger picture, that quarter looks smaller. It's the same way with God. When we're going through difficult times, boy, that quarter's right here and you see it, and it doesn't look very small. But when you go to God, God has a bigger picture. He sees the whole thing. And that quarter is in the proper perspective. David is turning to God and saying, God, I know that you have a different perspective. God, when I am afraid, that is the time that I will put my trust in you. You see, David is looking at the fears that he has. And he has a lot of fears. He's got the king of Israel after him. He's got the Philistines that are angry with him. David is pretending to be crazy. Many things are happening in David's life that he can't control. And the one thing he can control is he can control his response to the fears. And he turns those fears and he goes to God and says, God, I need help. God, when I am afraid, I will trust in you. He's also looking and reminding himself of the power and the size of God. Sometimes what happens is we put God into a box and it's a rather small box. And we forget that sometimes our fears get out of control. And when we have big fears, we have a small God. But friends, I'm here to remind you and to remind me this morning that when I have a big fear, I need to remind myself that I have a bigger God. So when we face fears or unknown situations and we can't wait until 2021 comes and we think it's going to get so much better, and it might. And it might not. But you know what's going to remain constant, remain the same, is that God is still going to be in control. And when we face fears and unknown situations and unknown times to come, whether it's today, tomorrow, next year, we need to remind ourselves of the faithfulness of God. Psalm 56:3. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. On this Wednesday morning, I want to remind you, challenge me to focus on the size of my faith, not the size of my fears. Oftentimes, when we put that back in perspective, we bring that quarter from here and we bring it back to here, it helps keep things in perspective. When we're afraid, let's put our trust, let's put our faith in the Lord. Let's talk to him. Let's read his word. Let's remind ourselves of the faithfulness of God. And that fear may come back into a better perspective. If I can help you in any way, please reach out. Love to dialogue with you, and I trust you'll continue to grow in your relationship with the Lord. Tomorrow, we're going to be back here for one more day of Fear Not, and I will see you Thursday morning at 9:30. Have a great day. Remember, faith over fear.